Hi there, welcome. My name is Simon Dervin and welcome to another instalment on the Inception Deck as we understand better how to launch successful Agile projects by exploring some of the artifacts of the Inception Deck in a little bit more detail. This episode is about an artifact called the Not List. Now when you look at this, you'd be forgiven for thinking this is just an in-scope, out-of-scope list, and you'd be perfectly correct. So why is it called the Not List then? Well, that's a really important thing, because the most important box on this model is the box that says what is not in scope. And the reason that's really important, and it's especially important if you're using the not box to help you scope what's in your first version or in your MVP or your MMP, what makes this really important is a psychological effect called the Endowment Effect. What that means is people attach much more value to something they already have than if they don't. Now in psychology, what that means is if I sell you a book for £10 and then ask to buy it back, even if it's 1 minute later, you don't want to sell it back to me for £10, you're going to want more for it, even if the book itself hasn't increased in value. People attach more value to things they already have. So why is that important for in-scope and out-of-scope lists? Well, think about it this way. Have you ever met a stakeholder that sees an in-scope list at the beginning of a project as a finite list they can't add to? I haven't either. Every stakeholder sees a list of features in scope as a list they can add to. What they don't see is a list of the things that aren't in scope as things they can take things away from. So they agree the out-of-scope list, and then they're happy, but they won't want to take things away. And that's the endowment effect in action. So the most important box on the not list is the things not in scope. And what that means you can do is really ignore the in-scope list. That'll grow as your stakeholders find out more things they want. But managing the things that are not in scope, especially if they're significant and they're important to your MVP or your first version, is really important. And this list at the bottom, the unsure list, that's your risk. If you've got a lot of things in there, and that's probably because some stakeholders think that's an important feature that must be in the first version and other stakeholders don't, then that represents risk of scope creep later in your product development. So keep an eye on that. So take your things in your unsure list and address them quite soon after your artifact. So that's the not list. Again, like a lot of these things, it's a model, it's an idea, it's going to be wrong. The value is in the conversation, and the conversations around what is definitely in scope and what's definitely not in scope are really powerful, especially at the beginning of a project development activity, and especially as a comms tool for your stakeholder. So with all these artifacts, a really important thing is to share them with your stakeholders, co-create them with your stakeholders, and help them feel part of that whole process. And this is a really good example where if you're not doing this with your stakeholders, you're probably going to make mistakes. So that's the not list, or the not box. The most important thing being the set of things that are not going to be delivered and getting those agreed with your stakeholders. I hope you found that useful. Thank you for listening, and I'll be back next time as we reboard the Inception Deck to launch more successful Agile projects by exploring another artifact in a bit more detail. Bye now.